A trace point is similar to a breakpoint. Unlike breakpoints, trace points give you the opportunity to perform an action when the trace point is hit. For example, you could unobtrusively print out information during application execution. To demonstrate, I've opened the trace points project. Let me show you what this application does before adding a trace point. I'll press F5 to run the application, and then I'll click on this silent trace point button. What this code does is print out a list of prime numbers between my minimum and maximum defined ranges. Let me show you the code. I'll stop the application, switch over to my code behind, and look at the code inside this button_click. I've made a note in here that you cannot use trace points if you're using the express additions. Now what this code does is create a list of integers, and then the code down here takes the starting and ending numbers, 500 and 600, and calculates the prime numbers, then loads them into the list, and then I assign the list to the data context, and then I bind the list box to the data context. That's the overview of what happens here. Now let's say that I want to print out some information about the process. If I want to do that, I would have to print a console write line within my application. That's what I'm doing here. I'm trying to find out why certain candidates were being rejected, why they're not prime numbers. So I can do that by looking at the candidate number and see what it was divisible by. Now in my code, I'm putting this in the console.writeLine. And if I click on this button, you can see that output here in the output window. But that means that I had to add this line of code to write information out when all I needed was some debug information. So trace points can be used to replace this. Let me copy this code here. Copy this, and then comment out this line of code. And then I'm going to add a trace point. I'm going to add a breakpoint to this line of code, and then I'm going to right-click on it and choose When Hit. It doesn't actually say the word trace point, but this is how you create a trace point. I'll choose When Hit, and then I'll say I want to print out a message. And I want to do a silent trace point, so I want to continue execution whenever this trace point is hit. Currently, you see I'm printing out a function name and the thread ID. Let me go see what this looks like. I'll click on OK, run the application, click on the button, and you see it's outputting the name of the method and the thread that was running. That's not very interesting to me, so I'm going to modify that trace point. I'll right-click on this triangle that represents that it's a trace point, and I'll put my text in there instead. And then I'll click OK. I'll clear out the output window, run the application, and it's sort of doing what I wanted to. It's printing out information, but it's not printing the candidate value and the current test value. Why is that? Let's go look. Well, if you read this comment down here, it says you can include the value of a variable or other expression in the message by placing curly braces around the value. So it's just printing out the word candidate, not the candidate value. So I'm going to put a curly brace around candidate, a curly brace around the current test value, and then I will delete the plus symbol because I'm not doing a concatenation now. And this double quote, and I'll run it again. Switch back to my UI, click on this silent trace button. I'm not seeing the results. I bet they're at the end of the list. There they are. One more demonstration. I'll right-click and choose When Hit, and this time I'll make it a non-silent trace point. Now it functions like a normal breakpoint. Every time this trace point is hit, it'll stop my code so I can examine it at the debugger. Now you know the way to silently print data to your output window with trace points.